everybody, how's it going? It's a Daily Shooter, and today I want to talk about a very important topic. This is a question that has been brought up to me more than any other question over the past several years, and that is, do I think California is a lost cause? Now, this is a question that I don't take lightly, so I haven't made a video about it yet because, to be honest with you, my head pulls me in one direction, my heart kind of pulls me in another direction, and I think it's a topic that shouldn't be talked about lightly. I think this is something that should be very analytical and something that should be thought through very carefully before I give an answer to you about where exactly I stand on that. Now, the baseline bottom, the basic answer is no. I don't think California is a lost cause, but I think it is damn close. I think it is just kind of dangling on dental floss. Now, I want to start in the very beginning. Do I think California is the worst place for guns? Because that's a lot of things, when people think about California, they think about gun control, and across the state, when people think about gun control, they think about California. It's just the main draw is California. But I don't necessarily think that California is actually the worst. Believe it or not, there are places that I feel are worse than even California. For instance, I think that New York's gun laws when it pertains to ARs are even worse than California's. When they have to build theirs, they have to build it featureless. They can't even have a muzzle device at all. So no muzzle device like a muzzle brake like we can have, no flash hiders or anything like that. Then you want to talk about Massachusetts. I think Massachusetts personally is the worst state for guns in the union. I think that they have the absolute strictest gun laws. There is one channel that I watch, I enjoy very much. Her name is Liberty Doll. She has a great channel here on YouTube. She represents Massachusetts and does a lot of great news videos. And I think if you live in the state of Massachusetts, you really should be watching her because she really does have kind of a handle on what's going on over there. And a lot of the stuff that I see her talk about shock me, and I'm in California. So that's got to tell you something. If I'm watching something and I'm shocked by that, then it's got to be something pretty big. So I personally think that Massachusetts is the worst state for gun laws that I've seen to date. So starting off with that as our baseline, California is not necessarily the worst state, but we do have some of the most restrictive and some of the worst laws in the entire country. Now, one of the reasons why I say we're hanging on such a small thread and why I think that we are walking such a fine line is because in the state of California, people have been desensitized to guns. If you live in the state, you understand this. Being desensitized to guns is, I think, the first and biggest step that California has made to full outright gun control, okay? Gun bans, gun confiscations. I think that it's not necessarily registration in this state. I feel that it's a control of what the populace thinks of guns here. For instance, in the state of California, it's not normal to see somebody walking down the street with a gun. You talk to somebody in Arizona, it's not a big deal. They see people in Walmart all the time, open carrying. They see people all the time, open carrying here and there. It's just part of their everyday life. It's not, they're raised with it. It's nothing big to them. But in the state of California, if somebody is seen open carrying, even if they're just, a guy walking around in a three-piece business suit and he happens to be carrying a gun, somebody's going to call the police. Somebody's going to call the police, and it's going to be a massive response. SWAT's going to show up, multiple helicopters, hundreds of units, K-9. It's going to be this all-out crazy thing. It's going to be live on the news that they saw somebody with a gun. Even if they can't find them, somebody had a gun and somebody saw him with a gun. And so every time you hear of somebody with a gun in the state of California, it's associated with bad. There's not a time where it's ever associated with good. So you turn on the news, you hear about these gun crimes and this gun violence and these murders and the gun man and the gun this, right? Everything is associated with gun. So you have a desensitization of seeing guns, and then every time you do see a gun, it's associated with bad. Somebody had a gun, massive response, got to be a bad guy. So it's always bad, bad, bad here in the state of California. So that's something that's got us walking on a thin line. Also, you add to the fact that we have activist judges. Our judges are not people who are bound by the Constitution like a lot of other judges across the state. Our judges are bound to their activist principles. So their activist principles are what really guide them to make the rulings that they want to make. Not necessarily the rulings that are correct, but the rulings that fit their particular agenda, and their agenda is gun control. So that works out negatively against us. Even if we know we are in the right, we are constitutionally correct in our argument, in the cases that we bring forth to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and even higher. These courts are activists. They are activist judge, activist courts, and so we're consistently knocked down. And with the Supreme Court not even hearing gun cases recently, obviously that doesn't bode very well for us. Now you talk about, state politicians. Our state politicians, even the ones that are Republicans, a large majority of the ones that are Republicans are really just Democrats with R's in front of their name. So that again doesn't bode very well for us because they've said it themselves. I mean, openly, in front of the public, they have said, California doesn't always vote constitutionally, but we'll take care of that afterwards in the court. So they know what they do is unconstitutional. They don't care. They're also activists. Okay, they are activists that have an agenda, and their agenda, again, is gun control. So you say, okay, well, then how is California not a lost cause? If you say that all of these things, we have desensitization, we have only bad things that happen with guns, we have activist court, activist judges, and we have activist politicians. So how is California not a lost cause with everything that's going on? Well, let me tell you, I think it's not a lost cause because I feel that our politicians are their own worst enemies and they don't necessarily see it. Now, this again is just based on my opinion, just based on what I see, my research, the things that I see going on in the Capitol. Okay, I think they're their own worst because what happens is they see themselves winning in court. Okay, so they pass magazine bans or they pass some type of assault weapons bans. They make the bullet button illegal, and all of these things have lawsuits that are associated with them from the NRA, the CRPA, Cal Guns. I mean, you name all these different places, Firearms Policy Coalition, and all these lawsuits go, and a lot of them end up failing in the courts, and they end up failing in the Ninth Circuit. And so the California legislature feels empowered to pass even more and more. And believe it or not, every day something new is being introduced here in this state. And so what happens is they keep piling it on, piling it on, piling it on. Eventually, what I feel is going to happen, where they can say, the Ninth Circuit can look at something and just say, look, we feel that this is constitutional because of this, or we feel it's constitutional because of that. Eventually, these laws won't be able to be ignored anymore. Eventually, they'll push so far past that threshold of the Constitution that it eventually will have to be heard by the Supreme Court, and a major ruling will come down in our favor. I think it has to come down in our favor because they're going to make it. So here's the thing, they skirt it right now. They skirt it by saying, oh, public safety and this and that. And, they really do kind of push the boundaries of what they consider to be constitutional. And they know they have activist judge behind them. And so they get the ruling that they want. But if they push even further and further, it's going to break so far. It's going to break so hard that once it does pass the Ninth and go up to the Supreme Court, it's going to be an open and shut case. Because there's no way that anybody that's not an activist judge is going to be able to look at what California is doing as a whole and not say that it's unconstitutional. And when the Supreme Court rules on it, well, guess what? That supersedes the Ninth Circuit, it supersedes the California legislature, and therefore they're going to have to deal with what they've created. So if they push hard on concealed carry, they push hard on this, they push hard on that, and finally, you know what? The activist judges have just throw everything at the Supreme Court, or maybe the ruling is different than another court that has ruled, like the second or the fourth, and it goes up to the Supreme Court and there's some type of conflict and the Supreme Court has to take it at that point. The Supreme Court is going to look at that and they're going to rule in our favor. They're going to have to see a case eventually, and you're going to see that comes down. Now the problem is, with California, there's so many lawsuits that end up going to go that way, that I think a lot of this stuff still can end up being overturned. Will this be a perfect state ever? No. Okay, I don't think that California will ever be a perfect state. It is just too blue to ever really come back from where it was. This state has been a long degradation. It used to be a red state. California did. It used to be a red state. And then it started turning. And this is not something that happened overnight. This is something that took time. And as the degradation happened and then became more and more liberal and more utopian and more anti-gun, they became a bigger foothold. So while they may have to follow the laws once they come down from the Supreme Court, it's not going to necessarily change the majority of the people's minds that are down here. Plus, I want to make one more note. The gun people that are out here, we are divided. More divided than I knew. I went to a gun show this weekend. I did a little bit of a meet and greet. Unfortunately, I ended up back in the hospital. A little bit of problem with the hernia still. Ended up back in the hospital till 1 o'clock in the morning. It was a big old shindig. Nonetheless, I met a lot of great people out there. One or two of the people that came up to the booth to talk to me, though, said some things that bothered me and made me realize how separated we are. And they said stuff like, yeah, you know what, this gun ban stuff, it really pisses me off. I mean, I'm okay with 30-round magazines being banned, but I don't see why they have to do this. Or I'm okay with the flash hider thing being banned. I mean, who needs a flash hider? But I'm not okay with this. So there was a lot of people there that were willing to give up certain rights as long as it didn't bother the things that they enjoyed. So if I liked a 30-round magazine and they didn't see a need for it, they were okay giving that up, which means that they weren't going to fight back like I was going to fight back against it. If they didn't like a flash hider anyway because they just use a hunting rifle, then you know what? They weren't going to fight for that. So there was a lot of FUDs, and I was really surprised to hear that people were willing to just give up on certain rights as long as it meant that theirs weren't going to be touched yet. And don't worry, they're coming for you next. But we are separated, so the only way that we're going to be able to do this is we're going to be able to unite, come together, realize that there's going to be no more, that we cannot stand for one single thing. If they say that, you know what, we're going to be getting rid of M-lock rails because we don't like the straight lines on M-lock rails, and you know what, you're a key mod guy, gives a shit. You have to fight for the M-lock. I mean, that's what I'm talking about, the ridiculousness. We have to band together as a state, as gun owners. We have to vote. We have to come together. No more of this watching videos, sitting on the couch and not doing shit. Actually get up and do something. Band together. Let's make a change. Put as many lawsuits up there as we can so eventually those lawsuits can't be ignored by somebody, i.e. Supreme Court. We need some help down here because it's not going to happen at a state level. It's going to happen for us only at a national level. Thin, fine line. We are just walking that fine line right now, guys. But I still think there is that little shim, that little glimmer of hope. So hang in there. Be prepared to fight. Thank you all very much for watching. Please like, subscribe. Have a great day.